Mayday! Mayday! This is Lieutenant Eric Ortegas of the Federation Starship Enterprise. I just got kicked out of a wormhole. I don't know where I am.
Strange New Worlds Episode Review. I would like the review to go now. Well, friends, we're back with the penultimate episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 3. That's right, we're up to Episode 9, the one otherwise entitled Terrarium. This one is going to contain spoilers, so if that's not what you're here for, why are you here? But you've been warned, now let's crack on with the episode. Okay, so this is a very, very wacky season, I suppose you could say, insofar as how things feel and are fleshed out. Last episode, by far, bottom of the barrel, worst episode of the season. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Possibly the worst, most terrible episode of Strange New Worlds, full stop. And then this episode coming along right now, Terrarium, just for the most part did everything correct. It did everything that I've personally been wanting to see Strange New Worlds do. And I mean, there were some issues, and we'll get into that a little bit, but just the whiplash and the jarringness of having two episodes back to back being the complete polar opposites of each other, not just in content, not just in, well, this is a comedy and this one is a serious episode. They just felt like intrinsically disconnected and different shows. The prior episode felt like a bunch of film students or theater kids just goofing around and having a good time with each other, not really caring about what they were actually filming, just having a blast with each other. This episode felt like what Strange New Worlds set out to be at the beginning, this grounded, updated version of Star Trek made for, and everybody hates this, so, cover your ears if you don't want to hear it, a modern audience. Just everything this episode did is what I've been wanting to see Strange New Worlds actually tackle in and of this version of the show. It focused on a Strange New Worlds centric character, not a legacy character getting the early days of Kirk, the early days of Scotty, the early days of Spock. We get a Strange New World centric character, somebody who does not exist outside of the canon of this show, and we get to explore them. We also get to explore themes that are, not the newest thing ever. This episode definitely was kind of cobbling together a whole host of prior Star Trek episodes, and not just Star Trek episodes going outside of Star Trek, and all of it just came together to do what I've been wanting to see. But it really was a breath of fresh air coming right at the end of the season, so I hope they can carry that momentum and just really go out with a bang, because if we went out with something like last episode, I don't know if I'd really be that interested or invested to come back for season 4, especially not if we have to wait another 4.62 years. All right, let's get to the actual episode. This one was Terrarium. It's basically Ortegas has a shuttle accident because of some randomly occurring wormhole that just kind of came out of nowhere, which we'll get back to that later, and she crashes on a moon of a planet. The Enterprise is unable to get in contact with her. They don't know if she's alive or dead. They pull out that tried and true Trek trope of, actually, this wasn't even a Trek trope I was really that cognizant of until this episode, and I'm like, wait a minute. They pull this out all the time whenever there's an urgent need that needs to divert the crew from the rescue mission they want to pull off. It's always a medical reason they need to leave. There's a vaccine they need to deliver or some form of medical supplies. I do feel like it's pretty much always vaccines. Maybe there's been a couple of times where it's food or something like that, but it does stand out that it's always medical supplies. It's almost as if that's the only really urgent thing they can come up with that's going to land with the audience and make us think, ooh, you know what? That's a good point. Medical supplies really are important because we don't want to see people dying. That wasn't necessarily new. It felt like this episode was just cobbling together things such as, let's say Arena, the Enemy, Darmok, Dawn from Enterprise, and the Galileo 7, not to even mention going back outside of Star Trek, because most of those outside the Galileo 7, of course, were based on Enemy Mine, which I think was actually based on some sort of World War II story, which probably was based on an ancient Greek story that I don't really know right now. So none of these stories are actually intrinsically true and brand new in and of themselves. Not that most stories are. But I like when they get to retell these stories in each iterative Star Trek episode. I mean, series, I guess you could say. We saw it done in the original series. Then they brought it back in TNG to basically be a reflection or a contrast point. So we had Arena, very famous episode, Kirk against the Gorn. Then they brought it back in Darmok and TNG to basically counterpoint the different type of commander that Captain Picard was compared to who Captain Kirk was, the different situations. Then I really don't remember. I mean, they did it again with Geordi and the Enemy in TNG. I really can't remember if they brought it back in either DS9 or Voyager. Nothing's really jumping out at me, but they did explicitly bring it back in Dawn and Enterprise. And the thing that's different with each of those episodes, there's a different reason for them telling this two enemies trapped together having to work together story. And I think the biggest difference with this one is, for all intents and purposes, based on how things end, a one-woman lesson. This isn't a lesson that we're learning as a culture or a species. It's not going to reverberate through the Enterprise, more so than just one woman being changed and kind of maybe letting that infect other people. That sounded insidious. I didn't mean infect in a bad way. Affect them, maybe. So this was really just a catharsis and a healing process for Ortegas in and of herself. But if you look at a lot of the other ones, you look at Arena, that was bigger implications as far as relations between the Federation and the Gorn. If you look at Darmok, that was bigger implications between the Tamarians and the Federation. If you look at Dawn from Enterprise, I think that was bigger implications between the enemy ship that wanted to destroy Enterprise and Enterprise. I don't think it was as grand as Earth and this other planet, but it was still larger reaching implications. Because of how things end in this episode, none of that's possible. It is purely just Ortegas learning a lesson and having to live with it and deal with the consequences that were outside of her control.
Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe.
Outside of the two enemies stranded together trying to work together, I really liked the focus on Ortegas as a character. As I mentioned earlier, I really want to see Strange New Worlds tackle the people and the era that is Strange New Worlds instead of setting up a pseudo early years of characters we already know. I want to know Una. I want to know La'an. I want to know Mbenga to a certain extent. I want to know Ortegas. These are characters who are linked and locked primarily within this show, and we don't really have any grasp of who they are. Pike even though we know his ultimate fate. These are characters that are supposed to be getting their time to shine in this era to show us why they were an important part of the Star Trek universe, not as background characters to show us the early days of Scotty and Spock and Kirk and all of that. So I really like when we get to see these characters taking the lead and getting their time to shine. I know it's just a minor thing, but it pleases my heart to get a call out to the Constellation and Decker.
Una, contact Captain Decker. We plan to rendezvous with Constellation on schedule.
I'm sure everything's going to work out fine for them. Nothing could possibly go wrong. I like to see the interplay on the Enterprise. However, this is one of the things that makes me feel of Galileo 7. The other one is the rescue at the end. We get this sort of butting heads between Pike and Una.
I am the best pilot on the ship.
Never heard that one before, sir.
One of them wants them to leave the search to go deliver these medical supplies. The other one is trying to play up a bit more that they need to stay and rescue Ortegas. Now, this worked better for me in an episode like the Galileo 7 because it wasn't one of our main characters playing the bad cop role. I know Una was trying to think of the mission and all of the important things, but I liked how it was done in Galileo 7. If I'm even remembering the right episode, forgive me if I'm wrong, but that was a Commodore, I believe, who was on the ship, who was ready to supersede the command and the orders of Kirk once they crossed the red line for the greater good, the greater mission. Kirk and the rest of the crew, they were dead set on rescuing the Galileo, which had crashed there. So none of our main characters were the ones that had to kind of come into this and play the bad person or the one that is going to leave the character behind. I know that was needed. I just feel like had they brought in somebody else, heck, even had April be the one who does it. I like April, but he could play that sort of foil that wouldn't make me feel any less about the characters on the ship. Not that I think too much less of them. It just felt a little bit like, come on, I know you care about this person. Be a little bit more compassionate here. Coming back to the showcasing of Ortegas, I really like that they showcased her skills outside of just being the person who flies the ship. We got to see her with her Starfleet training. We know that she was in the war and had some of those survival skills as well. We got to see her come up with plans and to try and rationalize and think her way out of the situation and to use math, science, skills to just come up with what was going on. She had reclamated water out of the available material.
I made water! Beto, if you could see me now, I have made water!
She was able to figure out and decipher the odd orbit of the planet and what that meant for the situation they were in.
But the perigee's way too close, which means the moon's orbit cuts right through the planet's thermosphere, through that toxic soup.
She was able to basically create a device more complex than Pike's beep chair, lost on a desolate moon, out of a tricorder.
It should give yes or no responses.
Agree.
And even when she was trying to come up with conversation with the other inhabitant on the planet, who I haven't mentioned yet, but shock and surprise, it's a Gorn. She was not the cartoonish character she's been played up to be as the background player in some of the episodes. They had every opportunity to have her right here say, "You fly the ship? I fly the ship too," but instead they had her a more fleshed out, realized character with real characterizations and real conversation, real motivation, where she saw the helmet.
That's your helmet? You're a pilot? Like me?
They could have so easily had her drop that "I fly the ship, you fly the ship" line in there. Very happy they didn't, because I feel like that would have detracted from an episode that was really a showcase of why Ortegas deserves to get a lot more spotlight besides just a glorified helmsman. Having her overcome the trauma, work with the Gorn, get to know the Gorn, it was actually great for us, the audience, because I feel like it was trying to take back some of the early days of Strange New Worlds where they were playing up the Gorn as nothing more than alien-esque monsters that were just here to eat and hunt people. Now that still exists, and there's still going to need to be some sort of reconciliation within the canon of the show to explain the difference, if there is a difference. I don't know if they're planning to bring in book canon where there's different sects and different casts of Gorn, different intelligence levels. I don't know if they're going that way, or if they're just going to kind of leave some of the more dark, gruesome bits of Gorn in the past, similar to how Discovery made some of the Klingons very nasty and they would eat people and things like that. That's still technically part of canon, but they've moved beyond it, so I guess we just need to try and forget that Gorn are going to bust out of people and eat them up, although that's probably still going to happen with Marie in the next episode, but let's put a pin in that and see where that actually goes. Absolutely loved all of the interactions on the planet. I knew from the very beginning that probably the Gorn wasn't going to make it out of this alive, because how would that have actually worked? But the way that actually ended, the way that it was sort of foreshadowed a couple episodes ago during the documentary when La'an was asked point blank, if you see a Gorn, are you going to shoot first? And she said something along the lines of, you either run away or you kill it before it can kill you. When we knew La'an was being sent as the head of the landing party to rescue Ortegas, the Gorn probably wasn't long for this mortal coil, or whatever you want to call it. And that's exactly what happened. Now, the actual real end point here was the introduction of the Metrons, who had been running this entire shebang as one of their kooky games, basically a precursor to what we saw in Arena.
We are the Metrons. We've inhabited this region of space since long before your species walked upright.
Now, I have a couple of thoughts on this. Well, it was nice to see the updated version of the Metron. It was nice to see the sort of massaging of canon to try and explain away a little bit of the details as to why this could happen now, but also happen in Arena without really conflicting with each other. But was it needed? If you completely excised the Metrons from the story and had everything else play out basically identically, have Erica crash on this moon, she has to work with the Gorn, everything plays out the same way, we get to the end point, La'an kills it, the transporter beam works perfectly, they beam up to the ship, and she's still dealing with that friend killing a friend trauma. Did the Metrons add anything to the episode whatsoever that wouldn't have been there had they not been in the story? That's really what it boils down to me. They didn't need to be here, outside of just slowly kind of tying into the canon of TOS and maybe making it fit a little bit better. That's not to say I didn't like seeing them. It was an interesting plot point. It very much reminded me of how things played out with the Tron lady from the Orville episode in season 3. but I don't think we needed them to really make this story hit in the exact same way. Now, it's possible they're coming back to play later on because they specifically mentioned to Ortegas here that they are removing her memory of the Metrons. So for all intents and purposes, only us as the audience have any recollection of this entire part of the plot. They said that they're removing their mentions.
And perhaps someday, we may need to reset your perception of the Gorn as well.
And that's leading me to wonder if that's going to be Strange New World's get-out-of-jail-free card where something happens, possibly in the next episode with whatever goes on with Marie and her Gorn hybridization, if they're going to specifically delete all Federation or Starfleet memories of the Gorn so that things can play out fresh in TOS and everybody will be meeting the Gorn from a point of not knowing what the Gorn are. And all of the events in Strange New Worlds that have dealt with the Gorn from the very start will be, in essence, erased from everyone's memory. I really don't want them to do that, despite how little I cared for the original depiction of the Gorn in Strange New Worlds when they were just horrible monsters and there was no real reasoning with them, because I don't feel like that's necessarily in line with what Star Trek wants to teach about trying to come to a coexistent point with other life forms. But I'd really hate for them to really delete 3 years of TV just so they can, well, we've erased all of that, hit the reset button so we can go to TOS scot-free right now. That would just feel like, what are we doing here? Again, I'm just speculating wildly, but this episode kind of left a little feeling like they were leaving the door open a crack to possibly play with things later on if they wanted to. Oh, and I guess I should mention it because somebody will probably point it out. Yes, I am aware that the Metrons actually did manipulate the things on the planet, at least so far as they made the shuttle, the Archimedes, fall into the ground so that Ortegas couldn't go back there for shelter. And they also seemingly protected them from the explosion at the end. When they lit the atmosphere on fire, probably they would have killed Ortegas and the Gorn if they hadn't intervened. But still, I'm just saying from a narrative standpoint, had the writers not written the Metrons in and just written the story so that everything played out as it did and everybody survived except for the Gorn and then Ortegas went back to the ship, I just feel like nothing would have been lost. The message still would have hit just as powerfully, and the potential future for a Lon and Ortegas friction based on this.
She was my friend. Lon is my friend too. I don't know what to do with that.
I think that has a lot more potential for disagreement or trauma or interpersonal conflicts as far as the show going forward than any of the relationship crap does. I would much prefer to see them explore that sort of relationship than La'an having somebody else's socks in her drawer. Oh my God, what are we going to do now? We're just getting too serious. Anyways, best episode of the season. Hopefully they can stick the landing with an even better end of the season, but I'm not really sure where we're going from here. What did you think of this episode? How are you finding the season? Do you think the Metrons were needed here, or do you think they could have written around them and just had the story stand on its own legs? Whatever you think, leave all that down below. Like, share, subscribe, hype, join, do all of the YouTube things. But until next time,
Join, wait, please hit subscribe.